Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. A little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Oh boy, just like that, we're back, Matt. We're getting set for UFC Fight Night. This one, Emmett versus Topuria. It's a big ABC card, and I see it over there already in the chat. Peter Shea's hanging out saying there's going to be a knockout in that main event, but Craig Hart and who else was it in there? Somebody else, Jerry Carey, saying that we're getting at it really early today. Now, Matt, lean back a little bit like Fat Joe, but when you look at this one, I mean, it is an early card, and I know we always say 2 hours before the prelims. The prelims start at, and I'm going to have to work back in Eastern time zone, because we're actually in the Atlantic time zone, even though all the tweets and everything are in Eastern, because you Americans, that's just the way it goes, but it would be at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Yeah, so when the prelims start, if they start on a half hour and we start a show in a half hour, nobody magically tunes in. We start in a half hour. So you got to start it at the O&O. But Matt, when we look at this card, I mean, this is a big card. The Salmon is tuning in, looking forward to it. Go ahead.
And that was the big thing I wanted to talk about. I feel like you really like to put shine on the bantamweight division, right? The best division in the UFC. I think featherweight still has a pretty good argument, and even lightweight too. I really think anytime you get one of those 135, 145, 155 type main events, you're going to get excited for it, and this is no different. I know Josh Emmett and Ilia Topuria, this is one of those fights where weeks away from it, you're getting excited for it because you know how high level it's going to be. Josh Emmett could make a difficult fight for anybody south of 155 pounds, really in the whole entire world. And for Ilia Topuria, this really is his big chance to finally prove himself to become one of the elite in the division. And I think it's a great opportunity too, because this is one of those fight of the night style fights that I think should be absolute fireworks.
If it lasts that long, and that's the big thing. For Topuria, you look at the fight that he had against Yusuf Zalal to come into the UFC. That's his only decision win that he has in his entire career. And he started to slow down in that third round. A lot of the wrestling exchanges between those two guys made it interesting. When you look at a guy like Josh Emmett coming off of a title fight for the interim belt against Yair Rodriguez, he didn't get it done. Rodriguez takes on Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 290. And that's the card after the card. You have Strickland versus Magomedov next weekend. And then, of course, UFC 290. That's coming at you, International Fight Week. So, Canada Day card as a fight night. And then you have that big-time pay-per-view. So, let us know who we have down below in the chat as we move through this one. Christopher Duda saying more than half the card will end in a finish. Any thoughts on that? It very well could. The Salmon saying, Heart says Emmett, Brain says Topuria, Wallet says please don't bet. That's probably a good way to go with it. The Boxing Prophets tuning in. B-Rip.
How are you doing,
I anticipate this is one of those shows, it's pretty well early for everybody that is behind us in time zone ways, because we start at 10. That's not that bad. But you guys, you're going to be kind of waking up, getting ready for it. Now, I'm going to really wake people up, Matt. We're going to throw it on over to the Fight of the Night screen, and I went squirrely AF. We're going to put spin zones on these ones, because I thought we'd have fun with it. People are excited about this fight. I know they are. Onama taking on Santos on the main card. This one's a banger. At 145 pounds, if you don't know Gabriel Santos, he was the LFA champ before he came into the UFC. Undefeated. He loses a controversial enough split decision against Lerone Murphy. But if you're going to have a close fight against Lerone Murphy in your UFC debut on incredibly short notice, you're probably a pretty darn good fighter. David Onama, undefeated before he came into the UFC. A fight of the night style fight, because if I'm not mistaken, when he fought Mason Jones, the fight of the night was a 2-round fight between Jun Young Park and Gregory Rodriguez.
I don't get caught up in the bonuses.
That was the fight of the night, but that was a fun one. If you look at this one, though, these two guys kind of show up to bang, and that's what makes it a fun fight.
I compared David Onama to Dante Exum earlier on this week, and it just means that Onama has all the skills in the world, right? We're just trying to see him put them all together and have one of those flawless performances. We know he does have all the skills, and he is just such a fun guy to watch fight, and that's why I think this fight should be phenomenal. Santos is going to try to get on the inside, make it really ugly for him, and Onama has great kicks, great straights, really underrated power. Not underrated power, I guess we've all seen the power, so I think this will be a really phenomenal fight.
It should be, and then we have a look at the next one. Matt, you got to get your head in the spot. Get it in the box, Matt. Zhumagulov taking on Joshua Van, and I put this up here for one reason and one reason only. That hairstyle's awesome, and I'm not going to do it today, but Zhumagulov taking on Joshua Van. A lot of people hyped up about Van making his UFC debut. First fighter to represent Myanmar in the UFC. He's out of Houston, trains at 4 Ounce Fight Club with Rafael Alves and Daniel Pineda. And if you watch Joshua Van fight with Fury, that's been his entire amateur and pro career. He shows up to bang, and he's really well-rounded. That's why I think this is going to be a fun fight.
It should be a fun fight, but we've probably talked about Zhalgas Zhumagulov way too much in our lifetime. Like, if at the end of my life I could just get the advanced statistics sheet and it tells me how many hours of my life I spent talking about this man, it probably goes into the days. It might even go into the weeks, if not months. So, Zhalgas Zhumagulov, he's always in a fun fight, and this should be no different.
It's like that, I think you should leave skit, the one where it's Claire's and they're getting their ears pierced, and it's the old guy. I just laugh all the time, so when I rewatch my life, I'm always laughing. Yeah, Matt. All right, so we're getting set for Emmett versus Topuria. As the folks join in, the likes there are certainly appreciated. Daniel Caselli saying, not a big Zhumagulov, can't really tell why I just can't get behind the guy. Maybe it's the hair. Well, he only brought the hair up recently. He's had 6 fights in the UFC. Why didn't you like him before?
And maybe it's like be a player in 2K. It's like +5 power with the new haircut. You never really know.
Did he steal your girl?
He very well could with a cut like that.
All right, as you know, with Fight Night Picks question mark kicks, if this is the first time, we go to the bottom of the card, work our way back up to the top. And an important thing to note with question mark kicks, there's a reason why we do this show. People miss weight and there's storylines throughout the week, and wouldn't you know it, people miss some weight and there's some storylines throughout the week.
Exactly.
So a lot of people were really excited about that fight that you had at the start of the card. Tatsuro Taira was supposed to take on Cledison Rodriguez. 129 pounds for Cledison. He misses weight. The fight is off. That sucks. Because, I mean, again,
we were excited for
what
that
really
one.
sucks, Tatsuro Taira, I said, like, champ camp. He's training with Suzuki. He's going to have the title fight with Ryzen coming up today. And guess what? Kleber Kuike Earps missed weight, too. So, Suzuki's the only one available to fight for the belt over with Ryzen. And all of a sudden, Taira doesn't have a dance partner.
It's too bad, because that was one of those fights where it's high-level prospect v. high-level prospect, right? No real losers in that fight, even though someone, of course, is going to have to lose. I was excited for that fight because, again, the winner kind of gets that springboard they need up the division, and the loser, you don't really write them off, right? Like, if you lose to Cledson Rodriguez or Tatsuro Taira, we're not just going to completely write you off. Like, you can still have a great career.
Yeah, it will be an interesting one to see how those two guys get matched up forward. Marcus Mustard, Cledison has to be 135 pounds, I think, or new promotion. You know what, Marcus Mustard? I would agree with you because he's missed weight in 2 of his 3 booked UFC fights, but Philly Fresh, Phil Rowe, he's on this card, and he missed weight a couple of times at 173.5. He made weight this week, so I wouldn't go too far when we look at that. But the first fight now that is on this card, Cody Brundage on about 9 days' notice, replacing Puna Soriano, taking on Sedriques Dumas. And for Dumas, he is one of the few Floridian fighters on this card, and he's one of those guys that gets it done with the striking. He is kind of unorthodox, but when he starts to roll, he gets guys out of there, and you might go, well, Craig, he stands and he bangs. What about that submission win that he had on Contender Series? That was wild against a striker, and Peñas, he was able to get that standing choke, which doesn't happen all that often, especially in the higher weight classes. So an awesome finish for Dumas there. But again, I mean, Dumas getting ready for Puna Soriano, I more than likely would have picked Puna Soriano. In a matchup like this, Cody Brundage finished in his last 2 fights. He dropped Adolfo Vieira only to get submitted his last time out, which is kind of like the reverse Uno of his own fight with Dalcho Linkyambula, where he nearly gets finished and then he gets a submission win. So in this matchup, it's kind of crazy. The Rodent Tree Resistance, anybody from Spain or Europe, it looks like you're going to have, Sergio Ramos is going to be there. Like, there's a bunch of soccer players, a bunch of Spanish stars going to be there for Ilia Topuria. The fans are excited, But when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, could Dumas get Brundage out? Yeah. Brundage has a decent chin.
He leaves the window open, though. And that's the big problem.
It's kind of shaky.
That's the thing. You never like to know that a guy has a good chin, right? I'd rather know that you have phenomenal striking defense and I never have to worry about your chin whatsoever. But Brundage can get hit on his way in. The thing I do like about Brundage in this matchup, though, when I said at the start of the week, and I'm going to stick with it, on a full training camp, I would have picked Brundage, not easily in this matchup, but I do think he has the type of skill set that can at least stifle a guy like Dumas, to where if Sedriques is getting a lot of success, if he's starting to move downhill and really gaining success with his striking, I think Brundage can go into the clinch. I think he can slow this fight down when he really has to. It's like a pitcher stepping off the mound. I just saw that thing on Twitter. Derek Lowe, shout out Derek Lowe. I think he used to pitch for the Red Sox.
Always wore a curved baseball hat.
He did. But Derek Lowe, he pitched against Joey Votto, and Joey Votto just stood in the batter's box and didn't move the whole entire time. It was like a weird mind game he was playing. But a lot of the times you want to slow it down so you don't play for the pitcher's rhythm. I do think Cody Brundage has all the skill sets to be able to slow this fight down. I know that's not going to make it the most aesthetically pleasing, but I think his striking is going to be good enough to where he doesn't get clipped, and I do think the grappling is going to be effective enough to where he can start to win rounds and moments because of it.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where I think the wrestling of a guy like Brundage is going to be able to stifle some of that offense of Dumas. Again, would it surprise me if Dumas won by finish? Not in the slightest, because for Brundage, he's one of those guys, hands kind of outset. He does leave those openings in the striking. The leg kick out of a guy like Dumas is quite good. It's just, has the cardio been tested enough for Dumas? Because I've seen it for Brundage. I've seen the wrestling be able to last through these fights. The worst mistake Brundage could make, and we said this a little bit recently, is go out there and become a boxer, like he did against Tresean Gore. He looked awesome there, but Gore wasn't really throwing the offense, and that's where the peekaboo style of Cody Brundage was able to win out in that one. If we have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes, on our Instagram story, 56% going with Brundage, so it is very close. Brundage is a slight favorite. Both of us in the matchup going with Cody Brundage to get the win. Matt, Craig, whenever you get a chance, look up the story of Ray Benavidez, the Green Beret. Is that like an American war thing? I don't know if I'm going to be tuning in for that one. Matt, when you look at this one, the next fight, Jamall Emmers taking on Jenkins. And Matt, other than the fact that one of the guys' nicknames about a racehorse, the other guy missed weight his first attempt. 147 on the scales for Jamall Emmers. He got that extra hour to cut it, and he comes in at 146. That's concerning when you expect a taxing fight between two guys that it's the defensive wrestling skills of Jamall Emmers. It's the offensive wrestling skills of Jenkins. The boxing of Jenkins, he does it from in tight. The boxing of Jamall Emmers, he does it from space. Even though Jamall Emmers made weight on the second attempt, that could ultimately favor a guy like Jenkins.
And I do worry, not about the weight missed, but just about the way in, I should say, for Jamall Emmers. Because like you said, it is going to be a taxing fight, not only from a takedown defense point of view, but he's going to have to eat a couple of shots, I think, to win this fight. And Jenkins on the inside, the kid's a bearcat. He's going to be able to disguise his wrestling, go for some takedowns, and throw really good boxing combinations on the inside. And that's why I think Jenkins can have a ton of success in this matchup. If he's able to go to the body and disguise some of those body shots, and then throw combinations up to the head afterwards. If Emmers is just a less durable version than what we have seen in the past because of the weight cut, I could see that being a big issue for him. And maybe it is because he has had some injuries in the past too, but I do start to worry Jamall Emmers is a little bit older. He's not old by any means, but he's not the youngest fighter in the world. He has had a knee injury, the weight miss. I don't know if I'm throwing up too many red flags for myself or if they are justified to bring
Matt, up. Ryan Whitaker says Jack by decision. Peter Shea, Jenkins has the dog in him. Boss Brud, Jenkins season. MMA Jesus 420, Jack via KO. Malik, I got Jenkins. And Esteban saying Jack by decision. The fans in the comments section, you guys going with Jack Jenkins to start the morning off. If we have a look at Fight Night Picks, 55% with Jenkins. So, yeah, some close ones between the last fight, Brundage taking on Dumas, and then this matchup between Jenkins and Jamall Emmers. Emmers is a pretty big favorite. Open minus 188, minus 203 or thereabouts. So about a 2-1 favorite. MMA 420. You guys not original with the names out there. Just puff, puff, blaze and name it. But when you look at this one, T-Way saying Jack wins by heart. Everybody over here going with Jack Jenkins. Does it give you any pause? Are you going with Jack Jenkins?
It does give me pause. I have a really hard time with this fight. Again, I think Jamall Emmers is going to have to make this fight really ugly. I remember the coach of the Lakers, Darvin Ham, in an interview in the locker room this year. Remember when Russell Westbrook was still on the team? He was giving this great speech, and it ended by, let's get greedy. And I thought that was the coolest line ever, right? For a coach to look at his players and be like, let's get greedy, you know? Like, we're not looking for one win on this road trip. We're not looking for 2 wins. Let's get greedy and get them all. And Russell Westbrook comes in and goes, But hey, guys, we got to make sure we have fun, too. We just got to make sure we have fun to completely ruin the vibe. I think Jack Jenkins is going to try to get greedy in this fight, and I do worry that he's going to overexpose himself by getting greedy in the fight, and that's why I'm still going to say Jamall Emmers. I think he has the better skill set, or at least the more foundation in his skill set right now. But if Jack Jenkins went out there, threw a left hook to the body and an overhand right, I wouldn't be surprised if he won.
Geez, everybody's on the side of them. But guys, like if there's two of you that have very similar names and it's 10:14 in the morning, it's just a joke, pals. Let's move on.
But also, being named after a horse. Oh, like, could you imagine if Josh Emmett came out and they were like, Josh Seabiscuit Emmett? It's just not an intimidating name, that's all.
Nah, he went with something completely different. I like Jack Jenkins in the matchup. I think that weight issue from Jamall Emmers is enough pause for me to switch the pick and go with Jenkins. Now, when you look at a guy like Jenkins, he's got to close the distance to land the boxing shots. He's got to be able to mount that offensive wrestling. And again, for a guy like Jamall Emmers in the UFC, that takedown defense has been almost pristine. And we've seen him struggle with Pat Sabatini after he rocked him. We haven't seen him tested that much with the wrestling. Emmers has that win over Corey Sandhagen that we do mention. For me, it's the leg kicks. It's those power shots to the body of a guy like Jack Jenkins. He likes to rip the left hook in there, and he's always sustained, dog on a bone type offense. So where I already did the gritty, for me, I do like Jack Jenkins in the matchup, but it really is a bit of a toss-up and a tricky fight to start this card off.
It was a real Mike Gesicki gritty, but I do have Jamall Emmers. Should be a great fight.
Oh yeah, Mike Gesicki. You gonna like him when he's not playing for the Dolphins?
Probably a lot more when he's not playing for the Dolphins.
Trevor Peek taking on Chepe, Jose, Machine Gun, Mariscal. Matt, when we look at this matchup, everybody's on Peak but me, which feels weird to be on that island. But when you look at a fight like this, I mean, for Mariscal taking this fight on just over a week's notice, he is going to be replacing Victor Martinez, 0-1 UFC fighter, but a guy that trains with the biggest knockout artist in the lightweight division, Carlos Diego Ferreira. So when you look at this matchup, I mean, you look at a guy like Chepe Mariscal, he leaves himself out there to get countered all the time. The reason why I have Mariscal in this fight, or Mariscal in this fight, is because his wrestling's better than Peak. I've seen him go more than a round or two.
Like Juan Mariscal, one of the great pitchers.
And I think that Mariscal has a bit of a longer leash in a fight like this than a guy like Trevor Peek. Trevor Peek, it's a lot of swinging. It's a lot of throwing. It's a fan-friendly style.
But I think just because it's unorthodox and it does look a little wild doesn't mean it's not effective. And I do think that has to be brought up because there's some people who shoot a basketball like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and guess what? It never goes in. Some guys shoot like Tyrese Halliburton, though, and it always goes in. So for Trevor Peek, I do think that he can find success by being that unorthodox fighter. I don't disagree with anything you're saying about Mariscal. I just worry about him taking this fight not only on short notice, but on short notice against a guy who can throw by such weird angles. I think it takes time to get used to a guy with such a weird style like Peak, that's all.
Yeah, Weston Wilson's fighting next weekend, and he fights like a southpaw Wonderboy Thompson, because that's who he trains with. He's one of the worst fighters that's going to ever make a UFC debut. He's taking on Joanderson
Been a lot of them lately.
Mariscal is a good fighter. He's lost to good fighters. He's beaten good fighters. And he comes into this one, for me, again, I just think it's more tools in the toolbox. But if you do have a look at Fight Night Picks, again, I'm sure everybody has Trevor Peek in this one. 78% going with Trevor Peek. So we'll see how that one goes. But the shirt meme that I have going down, you're going to figure that one out once we get up to that main event. But in this one, I'm on the island by myself going with Mariscal. But yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Marcus Mustard. Ghost Pepper Gonzalez walks so Peak can run. Peak by KO and hammer fist. If you watch that fight, it's crazy because Peak lands early and then he gets hit. He gets cracked just like he does in the fight before against Malik Lewis. Then he gets taken down, and then he rallies in the last 30 seconds, and he's able to get the win in that one. Matthew Rolla doesn't like the basketball references. It's the worst American sport. Bunch of prima donna crybabies. I bet you Matthew Rolla is a big soccer fan.
That tens of thousands of people, if not millions, get excited.
Big soccer fans. Split on that one. Matt, then we get into a big-time fight. And when you look at this one, Zhalgas Zhumagulov taking on Joshua Van. Now, it's another short notice debut. Zhalgas Zhumagulov. How could I forget? He was supposed to fight one Nate Maness. That fight did not happen. Then he was supposed to fight Rafael Estevam. That fight did not happen. Then he was supposed to fight Filipino Bunes. And Bunes, a little bit of the drug testing problem. So ultimately, Joshua Van, on super short notice, gets an opportunity to take on the 6-fight UFC veteran. Now, 6 men have tried, 5 men have succeeded. But if you look at it for Zhumagulov, 3 of those losses are controversial, and the one win, he just stamped the guy out of the UFC in Jerome Rivera. who was one of the...
That guy was tough. Not in a good way either.
One of the worst UFC fighters we've also seen. But when you do look at a matchup like this, Joshua Van, really well-rounded. For me, like, it's tough. And I heard Ryan Russillo talk about this after the NBA draft. He said, you don't want to go out there and talk poorly about college kids. And really
because they're 18 and
negative
like
on
a real bad guy.
Joshua Van's 21 years old. So if I'm ever going to critique him, I do it, like, in jest. But the only thing that caused me some issues was it's mixing the martial arts for him at only 21. He's had a few little lapses in some of his fights. He's either all the way in or all the way out, and he kind of takes moments to wait for his opponent to do something. Kind of reminded me a little bit of a Dan Argueta in some of his fights where we're waiting, we're looking for the counter shot, it's not there, and then after that, 2 or 3 shots have already landed for his opponent. You start to get behind the 8 ball, and then you have to get dangerous to really win that back. So for Van, it was the fight IQ when we're up against the cage, and then we just drop all the way down for a leg lock, and you don't get it, so you're popping back up, and now you find yourself up against the fence. I think a lot of people like Joshua Van because he's young, because he's a stud. I think he's going to be a good fighter at flyweight. And even though Zhumagulov's 1-5 in the UFC, I just think, again, the left hook to the body, the big overhand right, the leg kick, and the switch stance every now and again at a Zhumagulov. I've seen Van struggle with those strikes in fights, and that's why I have Zhumagulov, but I could be wrong in this one just because of how good Van is.
That's why I like Zhumagulov as an opponent in this matchup, because we talk about this all the time. Everybody knows what Zhalgas is good and bad at this point. Like, he's 14-8. That's not some pristine record because he's some world beater, like he's, a prime Yair Rodriguez or a prime Volkanovski. Like, he's not one of these fighters, but, like you say, he has a very defined skill set, and that's why I like him fighting a lot of these prospects, because let's say Van is able to go out there and beat Zhumagulov. That's going to prove quite a bit to us, I do think, moving forward, and it does put a decent ceiling on him because Zhumagulov has a pace, and he is able to mix his martial arts so well. So if Van is able to go out there and get a win, he is going to prove a whole heck of a lot to me, but I do still have Zhumagulov, not only for just his whole toolbox. I like the pace he's able to put on his opponents, too. He's not a guy who's just going to fall off the face of the earth in the last 2 or 3 minutes in that third round.
And Rocco R talking about Shane Burgos, who I guess didn't know that a season format, you got to get finishes early, but 30-26 is across the board. His opponent that was so young was actually supposed to make a UFC debut, last year or the year before? We did a video on it and it never happened. So listen, I mean, things happen. It's just like Ramazan Kuramagomedov that was supposed to fight Alex Oliveira. Now he looks amazing, but he's not with the UFC. So unfortunate that those 2 prospects couldn't make it. If we have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes on this one on our Instagram story, 70% going with Zhumagulov. Where are the Zhumagulovs at? All right, Matt. So then we move on to Tabatha Ricci taking on the lone Canadian on the card, Gillian Robertson, looking to pick it up with the Canadians in Vancouver. They went undefeated there. Robertson, she hasn't fought out of Canada in forever.
It's been a while.
It's one of those Canadians that's just holding on. So if you look at it for Gillian Robertson, she looked great her last time out against Tabatha Ricci's teammate, Piera Rodriguez. But if you look at Piera, she's a boxer and that's that. For Tabatha Ricci, she has that Muay Thai background. She likes to throw a lot at you, throwing the kitchen sink at you from distance. It might not all land, but she gets her bread buttered with her clinch control, her offensive wrestling, and worst comes to worst, she's an accredited jiu-jitsu player with a black belt. So she is a jiu-jitsu coach or trainer at Paragon BJJ, and she is a really special, fighter. If you look at it for Robertson, we talk about it fight in, fight out. The boxing gets better, but it's not the hallmark of her game, and I wouldn't F around and find out if I'm Gillian Robertson with her boxing as I go up through the strawweight division. I like Gillian Robertson in the fight. I don't feel confident in liking Gillian Robertson in the fight, if that makes any sense.
Zhao Zhao is just cracking her knuckles at the top of the division, waiting for Gillian Robertson. It's a weird fight, and this is why. Both fighters do fight in kind of similar ways, right? If they're going to win a lot of fights at the highest level, it is going to be because they're grappling more than anything. But for Robertson, I would say she has the edge in more set positions in this matchup, whereas with Ricci, if they do find themselves doing a lot of scrambling, I think she can have success. And I think the real big key is for Ricci, this is going to sound weird, don't defend the takedown attempts. Try to create...
She doesn't.
But create momentum off of those takedown attempts. We do see this. Come Swanson used to be phenomenal at this when he was more in his prime, going for those hip tosses when people would go for takedown attempts. Now, I think Ricci, if she is accepting the takedown and trying to use some of that momentum to then spring on top and get on top of Robertson, I think she is going to be able to have some success in some of those awkward positions that you might not think she's able to, because a lot of fighters, when they're on the mat with a fighter like Robertson, you just kind of assume Gillian's going to be able to win a lot of those moments.
Alejandro saying that you're the GOAT in this chat. First time, long time. Matt, when you look at this one, Tabatha Ricci, though, if you're going to try and do that, I think that's what Jessica Penne tried to do in the last fight.
No, I agree with you. I just think for Ricci, that's what her game plan is going to be. Because if you're Robertson, you might be able to go out there and outstrike Tabatha Ricci, but if we get 15 minutes of these two against each other, it's going to be a split decision that's not that... it's going to be a really close fight by the end of it. I really do think one of them's going to have to get that dominant position and really do a lot of work from it. It's probably going to be one of those fights where the decision comes down to that 3-4 minute point where one is on the back of the other, might not be able to complete the submission, but will be able to threaten for a lot of them.
Hey, Zach Mill, don't make fun of a hard day's work. And the second part to that, if you get your job done quicker, you're the one that's laughing in a hot afternoon sun if you're weed whacking and mowing lawn. So nice try, pal. But when you look at a matchup like this, Ricci could get it done on the outside with her striking, even though she's the much smaller fighter out of these two, like size-wise, frame-wise. It's kind of crazy. Her UFC debut, she gets finished by Manon Fiorot, who's going to fight Rose Namajunas at 125.
I'm oddly excited.
Who Gillian Robertson beat in a grappling match not that long ago. So for me, I do like Robertson, but 65% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going with Ricci to get the win in the matchup. The thing that's weird in this one, Robertson, she kind of touched on it in that interview that I did reference when she was talking to David Van Auken with Fight Bananas. Her dog passed away during this camp, and it was really hard because her dog's all over Instagram. So that really sucks for her. We'll see how she makes out in this fight. She kind of said that training camp was a little difficult. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Clay saying going for a split. And a name that I can't pronounce saying, how you guys doing? Or how you doing, guys?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, Matt. So we move into the next matchup. Matt, my guy, Laik Radzhabov, missing the weight.
He did, yeah.
The weight, 157 and a quarter pounds. So we're going in quarter pounds. They went in quarter pounds at UFC 289 in Vancouver, and they're doing it now in Vegas as well. You never see it, but now you do. So in a matchup like this, give me fuel, give me fire, give me a bunch of takedowns between these two guys. Laik Radzhabov went to the well his last time out. He went, 11 of 21 on takedown attempts? Yeah, 11 of 21 on takedown attempts his last time out against Esteban Ribovics. He got dropped in the second round. He rallied back through it. His cardio, it's like that Eric Church
I think it comes down to, can he get his hands around his opponent? Because if he is in some of those clinch positions, he'll look tired, he will be gassed, but at least he can fight in that exhausted manner from those spots. If he's exhausted in the middle of the cage, though, it's another story.
His heart's like a wheel. Baby, let's roll. Because it goes up and down, and side to side, and it's all over the place. So for Laik Radzhabov, we'll see how it plays out. Mateusz Rebecki last time out. He takes on a short notice opponent in Nick Fiore. Now, if Nick Fiore fought Esteban Ribovics, I take Ribovics all day.
Esteban can bang.
And that's easy to say. But if you look at a guy like Rebecki, it's takedowns. It's a very similar game plan. He plots forward. He's shorter. He's kind of stockier. He's a bigger guy. He's training with a couple of really good fighters, or a lot of really good fighters at ATT, but I see he's training with the KSW champ at this point. Rebecki, the former FEN lightweight champ for a very long time, 14-fight win streak on the line. But over here, Esteban Zamora saying, I don't mind when fighters miss by 1 pound, but when you miss by 2, I'd like to see him get the KO. My question is, if you miss by 1, why'd you miss by 1? Why couldn't it happen? Like, why couldn't you do it?
We've never cut weight before, so I don't know.
No, it really is hard to say in an instance like that. But I know we were split on this one to start the week.
Well, we're not going to be now because the guy who I picked did miss weight.
55% of the fans going with Rebecki, and it's one of those ones where it's been close all week on a lot of these fights so far. I still have Rebecki, which, like, it hurts my soul. When you follow a fighter all the way up, like a Piotr Jan was that guy. Like, we got to root for this guy. We think he's going to be great. Laik Radzhabov that's in the corner in the office with Hausch Manfield, who just beat his best friend Natan Schultz last night. That's sad to see. But if you look at a guy like Radzhabov, I followed him for a long time. I like him. Marcus Mustard, what's Laik's new nickname? The Tajik Tank. It's not Jaguar Paw anymore. I'm going to go with Rebecki in this fight. If Radzhabov won, it wouldn't be much of a surprise, but I do like Rebecki here.
I had Radzhabov at the start of the week, but I am going to switch the pick. The weight miss does really concern me in a fight like this, because I imagine this fight is going to be incredibly taxing for both individuals. I think it is going to be fought at a very high work rate, and both guys are skilled enough to where it's going to be really tough to go out there and get a first round, first minute finish, right? These are two extremely skilled athletes. I said it about 50 times in the Contender Series video, and I'm going to say it again. Rebecki shouldn't have fought in the Contender Series. That was absolutely ridiculous. Like, he was more than good enough to just make his UFC debut on a card and get the respect he deserves. So I'm going to switch the pick, but I still think this is a very close fight.
Weston Wilson next weekend. Rebecki had to do Contender Series. Just keep that one in mind. Both of us going with Rebecki, the former ADCC champ. And now we get into the fight that some people were talking about to start off this card. And if he tosses a Laik, it would certainly be appreciated. We're pumping it up on a Saturday morning. Rude Boy Randy Brown taking on Wellington Turman. And if you look at it for Rude Boy, looking to turn a win streak again. And he was on a tidy little win streak, and they fed him to a prospect in his hometown in Scrappy MMA's Jack Della Maddalena. And Brown wasn't able to get the win. He got sent on the back foot. He got cracked by a big right hand. He face planted, and then he ended up getting submitted. So a crazy loss there for Rude Boy. I like the fact that you watch MLB too. Oh, you got to cross train. If you're just MMA, it gets boring. But when you look at Wellington Turman, Matt, this guy pre-UFC was a berserker. And in the UFC, he's refined some things, but we haven't necessarily seen the killer instinct. Now, we did see it against Serkinov where he got dropped. He nearly got finished twice. The referee kind of let him sustain the ground and
pound. He got Forrest Griffin in that fight.
Yeah, and then he ended up getting the submission win. So awesome to see for Wellington Turman in that one. But it's been ups and downs for Turman against not the greatest level competition. Now he's moving down to 170 where he had tons of success to start off his pro career. In his amateur career, Wellington Turman at welterweight, 2-0 as an amateur, 12-2 as a pro, and the 2 losses to Jean Sequeira. And Carlston Harris has got a fight coming up. And in the Carlston Harris fight, Wellington went ham. So I like this fight. I just don't know about it for Turman.
It is a weird fight for Turman, but it's a massive opportunity for him too, because if you beat Randy Brown, then you're not going to be a ranked fighter in the division, not where Randy Brown is now in his career. But for your first win in the welterweight division upon re-entry being against a guy like Brown, I think it does prove that you definitely deserve a spot there, and that you can be an improving prospect at the division as well. I'm concerned though for Turman to see how he deals with the ranges, because we have seen some guys kind of go buck wild and just rush against Randy Brown, and some fighters can have success. We saw Della Maddalena was able to get on the inside, not in a reckless manner. Of course, he was much more technical with it with his boxing work. But when guys do pressure Randy Brown, it really comes down to where do they pressure Randy Brown. If he gets behind those 2 black lines, he can be susceptible to getting hit by some big shots. He is a fighter who I think he struggles a bit because he is so tall. He'll get his posture very high up against the cage, and that's when you do see him get cracked by some really big shots. The Luque fight is a good example of that, because what did Luque do? Luque got him up against the cage, and he really unloaded on him once he got him there.
Luke Rockhold thinks that he can beat Alex Pereira. Maybe Rude Boy Randy Brown could do something
But for
crazy.
Brown, it is interesting, right? Because I talked about this a lot in last weekend's main event between Jared Cannonier and Martin Vettori. It was, hey, how many more chances are both those guys going to get against the elite of the elite? Not that Randy Brown's fighting an elite guy right now, but if Brown loses this one, I'm curious to see where he goes to, because like you brought up, he'll go on this win streak and they'll kind of fall short of the top 15 or fall short of ranked fighters, and they'll go on another bit of a win streak and fall short. It would be nice to see Randy Brown finally get on one of those streaks.
Yeah, Randy Brown never able to crack that top 15. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
But he's been in big fights though.
Yeah, and Wellington Turman has had some big spots so far in the UFC. Hasn't been able to capitalize on it. Now at 26, with the run that he's on, are we in like a Thomas Almeida category? We'll see how it goes. I do have Randy Brown in the matchup. Some conversation around ya boy, Ian Machado Gary. Big fight against Jeff Neal coming up. Big test.
Dana White might watch our videos, Craig. That's all I'm saying. I've been calling for this fight for a while.
Big test. All right, Matt. So this is the fight that's got everybody kind of all over the place. And I really want to hear from you in that comment section. You guys are keeping it going. B-Rip, Craig, dining on that beef Wellington. I got myself a pork tenderloin last night, a souvlaki one. That's going to be for supper tonight. Not a big beef welly guy. But when you look at this one, Matt, Neil Magny, Nico Price. Nico Price. Phil Rowe. One guy gets finishes, namely against Nico Price. Now, there was a guy that wrote paragraphs about Phil Rowe in the comments this week saying, you guys said that Phil Rowe, he starched Nico Price. He must have skipped in the video because I said Nico Price beat him up for 12 minutes, dropped him, and then all of a sudden, Nico Price ran out of gas. Phil Rowe gets back up. Phil Rowe gets the finish. But all that to say, Rowe nearly got finished multiple times his last time out, only to rally back and get the win. He would have got a performance bonus if he didn't show up at 173.5.
First of all, shout out this, though, because if we're going to bring up Gillian Robertson's dog, Phil Rowe's mom's not doing all that well, so shout out Phil Rowe. Just hopefully everything's going well, because some things are a lot more important than fighting.
So Phil Rowe coming into this matchup, kind of the quasi-hometown guy, trains in the Orlando area, going a little bit north to fight in Jacksonville, fighting the all-time decision wins leader, Neil Magny, a guy who's been around for, 29 fights in UFC?
And that's the good thing about Neil Magny at this point in his career. He reached it before Derek Brunson even reached it, just so hey, you fought everybody who's ranked at this point. Like, we know how Neil Magny's going to rack up against most guys in the division. Guess why? Because he's fought most guys in the division at this point in his career, but I still like Neil Magny for the test that he is. He has all these great long-range weapons, the surprising pop that he still maintains on his shots, too, because Magny's not a guy who's going to go out there and hit you with one straight right, and then all of a sudden the fight's over. but when he's able to get the jab going, when he's able to disguise the straight right with the jab, I think Neil Magny can have good results.
The thing that scares me with Neil Magny, and I touched on it at the start of the week, but if you go back through these fights, the Dana Rodriguez fight, the Max Griffin fight, the Jeff Neal fight, I don't like the response to Neil Magny anymore when he gets hit, because he looks like he's hurt, and then he's got to kind of clinch up, slow it, stall the fight down a little bit to get himself back into it. I like Neil Magny hutting on the outside, and he does fight similarly, or I guess a fighter that you had last weekend fights similarly to Neil Magny in a way. Now, I know he got finished, and people aren't going to like the comparison, but go watch Christian Quinonez fights, just not the one against Kyung Ho Gong. Every fight, all the way out, hut, and that's exactly what Neil Magny does in his fights, and I think Magny kind of wins a lot of favor with the judges when he does something like that, so I do like Neil Magny in the fight. I know we're split on the pick on this one to start the week. Crazy Pato, you're hanging out, but when you look at a matchup like this, yeah, I do like Magny, but that durability's been chipped away. He's not getting any younger. The weight cuts can't be any easier. He's never missed one ever, so that's pretty cool, but I do like Magny here.
I can't disagree with anything you said, but I do think Phil Roach is going to be able to damage him before Neil Magny can get his engine started. And that's the thing. Neil Magny's like a 60s truck that runs on diesel. You don't know if it's going to start, but once it gets started, you're going to put in a hard day's work. So I think Neil Magny, if he is able to get that engine going, we all know how crazy his cardio is, but I just think Phil Roach is going to be able to damage him enough early.
I'll do you one further. He's like one of those old Farmall trucks that have a gas engine on one side, diesel on the other. Ooh. You have to start the gas engine first to then produce the combustion to get the diesel engine going. Insane. It's real galaxy brain stuff. They were able to do that mechanical way back when, getting it going. Matt, people learning stuff. Brendan Allen's taking on Bruno Silva. Blindado.
I have seen weird takes on this fight, and this is why I want to start that way. I've seen a lot of sympathy, not sympathy, but support for Blindado this week, and I'm a little surprised to see that. And I'll say this, because Blindado, I felt like a lot of people would have those poor performances, not poor performance against Pereira, but the loss against Pereira, the loss against Joe Mearshart, and that would kind of cloud their judgment going into this week, and I figured a lot of people would assume, hey, Brendan Allen, we all know how well-rounded he is, the gains that he's able to make fight after fight. I really felt like public support would be behind Brendan Allen this week, but I feel like it has shifted and become a more 50-50 fight.
And I think we touched on that at the start of the week. For me, I look at that Bruno Silva fight, maybe it was the shaved hair, maybe it was the goatee, maybe it was like some type of Shaggy, it wasn't me type of performance, but if you do consider Shaggy going to Halifax soon, maybe that's a road trip right there. Caught me on the counter.
Picture this,
Wasn't me. But when you look at this one, I mean, I like a guy like Bruno Silva, we've never seen him do that before. So, and then his performance against Brad Tavares, it's just give one to take one, rock 'em, sock 'em, robots, and he finishes Tavares. So I just consider the Mearshart fight a little bit of a blip on the radar. Now, what Brendan Allen can do is tire out those muscles, work the striking, work it to the body. His kicks to the body are awesome, and that's a big thing for Brendan Allen. It's almost like he's Bangkok ready, looking for those, and the fact that he can mix in the grappling. Now, Bruno Silva's a good grappler in his own right.
But I think Brendan Allen can go for takedowns and not just immediately think, hey, the floor is lava. And I'm glad you bring that up, because I do think Allen's takedowns and just overall wherewithal on the mat is good enough to where he can go for offensive takedowns. Now, Silva is not some guy that you just want to play around with on the mat, put your arms in bad positions, get your elbows on the ground. But I do think Brendan Allen is a strong enough grappler to where he can go there, not to make the fight boring, but as a bit of a stalling. If Silva is starting to gain speed, really moving forward with those big hooks, we could see Brendan Allen dump underneath and then take him down.
When Allen does that, though, he gets hit.
And that's what worries me. If we see Brendan Allen on the back foot, and probably whoever's moving forward is going to be able to win this fight, because Brendan Allen, when he's able to throw that body kick moving forward, the range that he's able to throw it from is very long distance, and he can mix in his takedown attempts, which makes him a much better fighter.
If Allen gets himself into a clinch position against Bruno Silva, those uppercuts are going to finish the fight from Bruno Silva. So I do like Brendan Allen in the matchup, which does scare me. So if you look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one, I don't imagine that they're 74% for Brendan Allen. So we do have Chandler Witt saying Brendan Allen going to need that sim body roller after this fight. Chandler Witt, the shirt here today, it's for you, it's for Matt, it's for everybody. But I'll continue that on as we get to the main event. But this fight, it's gonna be one-way traffic, one way or the other.
I would agree with that. And what does Brendan Allen do if he wins, though? Because he picked up a massive win his last time out, and I really assumed they were going to allow him to fight up in the rankings to get one of those bigger names in the division. So if he beats Silva, you'd have to assume they finally do that for him.
Yeah, you would have to give a big name to either guy. And for Blindado, you look at the loss to GM3 as maybe a blip. The other loss, to the champ who was, and now he's moving up to fight Jan
And that was a
Blachowicz.
great fight, honestly. Like, I know Pereira won that fight, but it was pretty back and forth. Like, Silva landed his own big shots, too.
All right, Matt. So we move forward and we have a look. And yeah, it is a good point. Brendan Allen was supposed to be in a main event against Shaq Hermansson.
Exactly.
That one fell out and Silva takes the fight. But Silva had a full camp for this. Weird fight. David Onama taking on Gabriel Santos, the former champ over with the LFA. And we love Gabriel Santos, and everybody loves Gabriel Santos. He's more than a 2-1 favorite in the fight, which is wild because David Onama's taken a long time off since his slobber knocker fight of the night, fight of the year contender against Nate Landwehr. And I think there's one thing that plays an element into it. Nate Landwehr goes out there and then ultimately works his way up to fighting Dan Ige. And I think maybe Nate Landwehr, I know it was a step too far.
If that fight was 5 rounds, though.
It was a step too far. Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
It was 15 rounds.
Like, Nate Landwehr made that fight much closer than I ever thought he was going to.
Nate Landwehr gets steamrolled against Dan Ige.
No, I know, but the fact that he was still in that fight by the 3rd round, I thought the fight was going to be over 40 seconds into it.
It was a little weird, though, where, like, Landwehr just didn't get it going. It was that start me up Keith Richards thing, and he wasn't into it. But in the fight against Onama, he got beat into it in the 1st round, then he rallied in the 2nd round, then the 3rd round was really close. So I think a lot of people look at that loss really badly for David Onama. They look at the corner, they look at the gym, and everything's bad about it. Now, Onama's been training at Factory X with so many good fighters in the lower weight classes. The Dobers, the Gaethjes, the Chepe Mariscal, who's on this card. Like, a lot of really good fighters. Yusuf Zalal as well. And you have that whole bag of tricks. The only thing that I worry about with Onama is he leaves his chin out there to get hit, and his takedown defense isn't all that great. But then on the flip side, his offensive striking's great, and his offensive wrestling's pretty good. So when you look at a fight like this, I think it's going to be really fun. I think it's really going to be a good fight. But I do have a hard time trying to make the pick. I had Onama at the start of the week. You had Santos. But this is one where a lot of people are on Gabriel Santos. I just wonder, have people watch Gabriel Santos fight outside of the UFC? Because that's one thing that happens. You get these big prospects. They come in. They fight on a main card. They have one fight in the UFC. And then nobody goes and watches the tape, and you just kind of forget about everything.
The thing I worry about with David Onama is, and I've really liked what I've seen out of him in the UFC so far, he has a very high-level skill set, but we have seen a similar archetype of fighters have success against him, and that's just those guys who are going to move forward, and yes, you're going to eat some big shots to have a game plan like that, right? Like, Nate Landwehr had to eat some shots as a result. Mason Jones back in the day had to eat some big shots as a result, but if you can get your head in David Onama's chest, he hasn't necessarily mastered that Brian Ortega range yet, where I'll never forget, because Brian Ortega is just a great example of this. He had great jiu-jitsu and great boxing, right? But guys who get on the inside make it really uncomfortable for him because he's not a one-of-one wrestler and he has really long arms, so he can't really hit guys on the inside. So now Brian Ortega has great elbows, right? He has an answer to that range. For David Onama, this is the one little extra wrench I'll throw in that does concern me. If he doesn't get that finish earlier, if he's not able to get a lot of damage early, his strikes slow down in that 3rd round, and I do think that's going to make it a little bit harder for him to go out there and get that knockout punch or that finish later on in the fight. I don't doubt he can carry his power very late, but that's the one thing that you do notice later on in the fight. His hands are extremely fast in the opening round. They're pretty fast in round 2, but they do start to slow down as the fight progresses, and I do worry that if this fight gets really ugly, and we do see Onama defending a lot of takedowns, going for his own takedowns, fighting a very high work rate fight, that it might cost him on the back end of it.
Well, Matt, I mean, I see it over there, the boxing profit. 63 likes, come on, let's get to half. 150. What, you can do it. It doesn't take that long, but if you look at this one, 50-50 at Fight Night Picks. I mean, you can't see it because of the glare, but 50-50 over there. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. James F., shout out the Canada boys, keeping it steady with pre-card picks.
Thank you, James.
A lot of talk about the PFL. Unfortunately, I didn't watch that card last night. I needed some shut-eye, and I watched the first episode of Black Mirror from the new season. So that was interesting. And then we move into
a heavyweight clash.
Matt, a couple of big-time guys. Now, Austin Lane is 6'6", and we touched on this before the show started. Don't talk about the basketball, Matt. I like tall guys. I like tall guys that play sports. I like tall guys that are now Celtics. My guy, Kristaps Porzingis. I'm excited about that. Am I excited about Austin Lane in the UFC? I guess I am. I have to be. Matt, Justin Tafa, coming to America. Came to America, showed up again. 266. Thick boy. Now, Justin Tafa, one of 2 fighters to miss the heavyweight limit. The other one fought Austin Lane at one point, Greg Hardy. So, Justin Tafa reaches the limit, and, I mean, push it to the limit. Let's see what Justin Tafa can do. This fight's weird.
Walk along the
That's what I was going for. JJM saying going with Lane, Esteban going with Tafa. So what would you say in this matchup? I mean, Corey McGregor, Tafa's hard to predict. Again, I'm 2-4 picking Tafa fights, and you're 3-3.
Do you know what's hard to predict? Big heavyweights who leave massive openings when they throw their big heavyweight shots. Yeah, guess what? Hard to predict a roulette wheel, because that's what it is when Justin Tafa's fighting. He's going to throw those big hooks. He's going to close the distance, not with a jab, not with a leg kick, not with like body kicks like Yair Rodriguez. I don't know why I've shouted him out so many times this episode, but you get the idea, right? Like, there's some athletes in the UFC where you watch them fight and you're like, wow, never in a trillion years could anybody I know ever do this stuff. Justin Tafa throws big bombs, and sometimes he gets hit by big bombs. This fight comes down to, can Lane counter him on the in-between? Because Austin Lane is massive, and he does have really good hand speed too. I don't want to just bring up the fact that he has such a big body at this division, but he does have that kind of 1A athleticism too. He's got that fast twitch. I just worry about the in-betweens once he does start to fight guys up the division, but I think this is a fun heavyweight fight unless it gets out of the first round, then it could be a little bit more.
He reminds me in size and in hair of Sugarfoot Adams that fights at middleweight. He's really tall. He's kind of skinny. Like, Austin Lane's kind of cut from that same cloth. Now, Sugarfoot's a southpaw and Austin Lane's
I wouldn't say Austin Lane's skinny.
I mean, no, but he's 245.5 at 6'6". Like, he's not
in good shape.
Yeah, well, and he's not 6 feet 266.
But that's what I mean. This is the thing, guys. Like, LeBron James wouldn't be a heavyweight. Like, he would fight in heavyweight. Guys who are 6'8" probably shouldn't walk around at like 400 pounds and try to be professional athletes.
They probably shouldn't be like Chet Holmgren either. But it is what it is. Feet problems. Matt, when you look at a matchup like this,
in his life.
I do like Tafa. I mean, we'll pancake leaning Tafa, but I always want the athletes to win. Football players, kind of all over the map. Matt Mitrione, Brendan Schaub, Austin Lane, Greg Hardy.
Here's the thing. It's all over the map, but for the amount of MMA experience they have, they do pretty well in MMA, I would say. Like, Matt Mitrione had never fought before going on The Ultimate Fighter. Brendan Schaub had no experience. Like, for the majority of these guys coming over, yes, they don't have a lot of MMA experience, but that athleticism from football can carry them a little bit further than you would assume.
The thing about the reach with a guy like Austin Lane, he doesn't really use it because he crashes forward with his long limbs, and that's how he gets finishes. He's got a nice right high kick. He's got really, like, he kind of like, not Sedriques Dumas, he blitzes, but he blitzes with his arms way out and his head chin up, and that's where I think he can get countered by a guy like Justin Tafa. But as I said, it's the Dan Tom special. Justin Tafa, when he has longer extended fights, he works the body really hard against these guys, and the judges don't score it. So if you like a Justin Tafa as the fight goes on, like I have, Corey McGregor, Tafa will go to the body. It hasn't worked for Tafa in the UFC. He's lost the fights that he's gone to the body, which doesn't make sense. But I do like Justin Tafa in the matchup regardless. Jay Greg gets it. What are we doing here, Bappa?
Yeah, I've got Tafa, but the winner of this is in beating Stipe Miocic.
Tafa Bappa, 67%, 2/3 going with Justin Tafa in the matchup. All right, now we look at the co-main event, Matt. Amanda Ribas taking on Maycee Barber. Matt, I opened the video up to start the week and threw everybody for a loop. I said Amanda Ribas wins by decision, and I'm not off of that one. Trey Hall, Grady Dick, how are the boys feeling? Troy Hall, we'll get to you. Malone Hart with the giant super chat. That is much appreciated. Malone Hart, MVP of the show. MVP of the show. You can't see it, but Fight Night Picks prediction MVP. It goes to Malone Hart this week. The giant super chat. Thank you so much for hitting up that super chat. If you guys can do it, it is always much appreciated. The Grady Dick pick, I know you're about it.
I was excited for the Dick pick. Here's the thing. Grady Dick I thought was going to be gone by the time the Raptors pick, but they desperately need shooting. That's the one thing that they really need on their team. So I'm happy with the pick. I don't expect him to be insane his first year, but if he could become like a Kevin Huerter, I'd be pretty happy with it, honestly.
Like a Steve Novak. Matt, Amanda Ribas taking on Maycee Barber.
I have a harder time with this fight than you do, and I'm only going to say that based on how you started the video at the start of the week, because not only have I seen a lot of support for Maycee Barber, I think she does have a very obvious game plan to win this fight, and it's just be that crashing forward kind of fighter. I don't know if Amanda Ribas has enough power to keep Maycee Barber off her if she's not able to implement her own kicks. I do know Amanda Ribas is a good striker. I'm not sitting here saying she's not a good striker, but she doesn't have enough pop on her shots, I don't feel like, to where if she's not able to get the takedown, how does she keep the pressure of Maycee Barber off of her? I just think that's one very obvious game plan, where if Barber puts her head in her chest, makes this a really ugly fight up against the cage, she could have a ton of success.
And Maycee Barber is one of those fighters. You saw that later in the fight against Alexa Grasso, where she was able to kind of make it her own pace and win out that third. But if you look at it for somebody like Barber, cardio for all 3 rounds. We've seen the finishing ability in the UFC when she gets it down to the mat, dog on a bone. She's not like a neon belly Dennis Bondart, that guy. That guy.
That was bad.
We're done with Denis. But Neon Belly to try and just stay on. It's not submission over position or finish over position. She'll get the position, be dominant in the position, and then go for the finish. Now, that's a big difference to somebody like Maycee Barber. I think Hebos wins out in some of the scrambles. I think Hebos can dictate some of the length. And we even saw Hebos come on strong against Caitlin Chookagian in a wild fight where she was ranked really low in the strawweight division and fought the number 2 overall flyweight to a split decision loss. So at Fight Night Picks for the total votes on it, 70% going with Hebos, 30% with Maycee Barber. But for me, I do have Hebos, as Clay mentioned, the judo pedigree, the black belt in jiu-jitsu, and the ADCC, the IBJJF champ, not the IBJJ. What is it? IMMAF. There's a lot of acronyms that's floating your head. Hebos won the IMMAF title when Mariscal, Shorty Torres, and Carlos Hernandez won it. So for me, I do like Amanda Hebos in the matchup. But the whole thing about us sleeping or not sleeping, I guess it's a little bit of a turn, because usually in most fights I go, this is how this person wins, this is how the other person wins, here's my pick, but I think both have a good chance. For me, I do think Amanda Hebos gets the win, that's all.
I like Hebos in the fight, and I do have her in this one, but again, I just think Barber has that one area that can easily get her the win. If she can keep this on the feet and just pressure Hebos a lot, I think the movement of Hebos can be really important to get her back off of the cage, because from that one position, Maycee Barber is quite effective, so I worry about that, but I do have Hebos ultimately in the pick.
All right, Matt, so we get to the main event, and we kind of touched on it. Now I'll let the cat out of the bag. And I just mentioned one of the names. Steve Novak, Marcus Camby, Richardson, and then a first-round pick that turned into Jakob Pertl. Matt, they all got traded from the Knicks to the Raptors for not Kyle Lowry. People are going to think...
Nick. Oh, wait.
Yeah, people are going to think it's Kyle Lowry. It's my guy, the primo pasta man, Andrea Bargnani. Now, I wear this shirt.
Story. We once figured out small ball was the greatest thing ever because Andrea Bargnani destroyed Prime Dwight Howard.
I wear this shirt for one reason and one reason only. Italian. And Italians get beat all the time. And in the main event last weekend, everybody slept on Craig Allen. And Jared Cannonier had a record-setting performance. And I'm on that island again in a main event. I have Josh Emmett in this fight against Ilia Topuria because I've seen Topuria eat a head kick and absorb it against Shai Herbert. I saw him fight against Yusuf Zalal, where he stuck to the game plan of wrestling, couldn't get Zalal out of there, a lot of good scrambles, but he did start to slow in the third round. Obviously, people love Topuria. I've been on him since he was with Cage Warriors. I've talked about him. Again, I don't expect everybody to know that, but when Fight Night Picks was just a website and a podcast, I was talking about Ilia Topuria before he was in the UFC. I've been jazzed, I've been amped. I just take a stop off the train and I'll get back on the next time. Topuria is one of those guys. He has absolute lasers in his hands. He hits really hard. I did say he got rocked in the second round against Bryce Mitchell before he drops Mitchell. He got rocked backwards. He got sent back a little bit. He got hit by a 4-shot combo. But if you look at a guy like Topuria, the wrestling's great, the striking's great. Topuria seems to be that guy, and there's people that are saying Topuria is going to beat Volkanovski, which would be something. But I think this is going to be one of those gut check fights where Emmett's able to withstand it, able to wear out on Topuria. Third round, fourth round, fifth round, if he gets there, Emmett kind of pulls away.
I look at Josh Emmett the way I look at Al Horford. Age hasn't affected him yet. But you still worry about it every single time you watch him on the court or in the cage. And for Josh Emmett, he is close to 40 years old now at the featherweight division. He's taken a lot of damage at this stage of his career. And yes, he's more durable than an old leather boot. We have seen Josh Emmett eat some fight-changing power shots and come back and be able to land his own. He's one of those rare few fighters, and this is not an exaggeration. Josh Emmett carries his power so effing late, it is not even funny. From minute 1 till minute 25, if you're in the cage with this guy, he has the ability to knock you out because that is how strong of an athlete he is. This is the only concern, though. I think he might wait a little bit too much on a guy like Ilia Topuria, and if he is waiting on the back foot, yes, it is going to allow him to land those big counter shots, and we all know how effective they are, but I just don't know if him letting Ilia lead the dance is going to be his most effective way to win. I'll be curious, too, to see, is Emmett going to go for some offensive wrestling? Because for a lot of his career, the wrestling background has been used a lot more of a defensive crutch for him instead of something offensively we see him go for. Emmett's not a guy like a Chad Mendes who we see shoot for, 10, 11, 12 double leg takedowns in a fight. Even though I do believe he does have the ability to in his back pocket, we just see the wrestling used so much more as a defensive aspect. I love this fight because I love the fighter that Josh Emmett is, but I do have the younger guy. I just think the hand speed's going to be a little bit of trouble for him.
VT loves the Celtics. I'm only wearing Raptors jersey because I was the biggest Andrea Bargnani fan, and that's not a joke. There was somebody else up there talking about Josh Emmett, saying that there were a lot of people on Vettori last weekend. There was between 74 to 76% going with Vettori in that matchup. So if you do look at this one, Marcus Mustard, Emmett is going to get the win. Matthew saying that Emmett's going to get picked apart just like Yair did. Yair's more of a 3-level attack. Although Topuria will go to the body every now and again.
He doesn't have the kicks, though.
He doesn't have the kicks to the legs or to the head or at any of those spots. But again, a lot of the fans going with Ilia Topuria in the matchup. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if Topuria goes for the wrestling either in a fight like this.
See, I think he tires himself out if he does. That's what I worry about.
That's the thing that I worry about, and that's why I like Emmett, especially as it goes along. Now, if Ilia Topuria got a finish in this fight, would it surprise me? Not in the slightest. I mean, it's a big reach to pick Josh Emmett in a fight like this. I realize that. And if you get it wrong, you look sort of silly. If you get it right, you look all right. So it is what it is. It's wishy-washy. But if you look at a guy like Ilia Topuria, and if he's able to go out there, mix in a little bit more volume with his power shots, again, that's another method to victory where you keep Emmett on that back foot like Michael Johnson was able to do. And 1 round, 2 round, into the 3rd round, Michael Johnson's looking pretty darn good. Armin hits up the super chat. Much appreciated there. So, I mean, you do like Topuria, but it's going to be a fun fight.
Oh, this is phenomenal. There's a little sicko version of me that just wants Topuria to go in there and throw absolute bombs, and then we also get the same from Josh Emmett. If these guys fight like a Clay Guida, Diego Sanchez-esque fight, like, it'll be absolutely insane. I think this is a great fight, though. And again, if Topuria beats Josh Emmett, what happens? You immediately get thrown into that top 5 category of featherweight, and top 5 in featherweight is absolutely on fire. There's some of the best fighters you will find, regardless of weight class. So this is a really important fight in the careers of both athletes.
Gagnon saying that we're starting live. We started 2.5 hours live because if you start on the half hour, nobody tunes in. And it is a very early morning card because it's on ABC. Those ABC cards are early. So I think the post-fight press conference starts at 6 p.m. Eastern. That's nice. How early it is. So look forward to that one. You guys have been great. You can toss us we got to get over 100 before the end of the show. The super chats have been great. So thank you very much to those who have hit up the super chat. If you can't, you can toss a like. Those ones are free. We will stack the deck once more. We're different on a few of these. Cody Brundage taking on Dumas. It's really volatile. I have Brundage, but it's a tough one.
I got Brundage. If it was a full training camp, I would pick Brundage and not really think twice about it, but I'm a little bit hesitant due to the short notice nature.
Justin, Ronnie, it went to a no contest, so we're all good there. Super chat from Ben Brandt. Cheers, boys, from Victoria, BC.
Thank you.
Ben, were you able to make it to UFC 289? I mean, cross the ferry or take a float plane
Victoria
from
looks beautiful, I must say.
Over to Vancouver, the old Vancouver Island. Matt, Jamall Emmers taking on Jack Jenkins. Give me Jenkins in this one.
I have a really hard time with this fight. I thought about switching the pick too because of the weight concerns, but I'm still going to go with Jamall Emmett.
All right.
Or Jamall Emmers, sorry, not Emmett.
Jamall Emmett. Trevor Peak taking on Chepe Mariscal. I'm on an island. Give me Chepe Mariscal.
This should be an all-action fight, and I've got Trevor Peak.
You sure did make UFC 289. Well, that's awesome.
Nice. Good for you, man.
Just an all-Canadian night. Zhalgas Zhumagulov, Josh Van going with Zhumagulov. 2
men who get too excited for a Zhalgas Zhumagulov fight, but we've got him in this one.
Yeah, it was wild. Somebody hit me up on Twitter, I think it was, and was like, I haven't heard a lot about Zhalgas this week. You guys haven't been talking about Zhalgas. Bud,
we've been talking about Zhalgas for 3 straight weeks.
We talk him in non-Zhalgas videos is where we talk about him. All right, so we get into the next one. Tabatha Ricci taking on Gillian Robertson. Gillian Robertson going with Gillian Robertson in the matchup.
I like her in this fight too, but again, all the positions she can have the most success in also are pretty dangerous positions to go into when you're fighting a fighter like Ricci, but I do have Robertson.
All right, then the next matchup, we have Rebecki taking on Radzhabov. Give me Rebecki in the matchup.
I'm going to do a reverse switch of the pick and also go with Rebecki now.
All right, man. Then we have Brown versus Wellington Turman. Give me Rude Boy Randy Brown to fight Matt Brown.
Take it. I've also got Randy Brown, not Rudy Brown.
See, Randy's already fought Brian Barberena, so they can't make that one twice. Neil Magny's taking on Phil Rowe, Philly Fresh. I do have Neil Magny in the fight.
Give me the Fresh Prince in this. I just think for Neil Magny, his time at being sort of one of those top 12 fighters is coming to an end.
All right, then we have Brendan Allen. So Magny's putting a number on the line when he takes on Phil Rowe. Brendan Allen's putting a number on the line to take on Bruno Silva. Allen was originally doing a main event against Jack Hermanson, and on a month and a half's notice, they put in Bruno Silva. So full camps everywhere. I think it's going to be a good fight. It's a competitive fight. It's a tough one to make a pick on. I have Brendan Allen, but this one's tough.
I'll say this because we don't say it enough. Good on Brendan Allen for staying active, because I don't really feel like he had to take this fight. Like you said, a guy
He fights a lot.
He had a main event opportunity against a really high-profile fighter. I know Jack Hermanson might not necessarily be in his prime, but those are the fights that you look for on your way up, right? A guy who has a big name who's not necessarily in the prime of his career anymore to get a big win off of. So shout out Brendan Allen for taking this really dangerous fight in a spotlight that is much more diminished than the one that he was going to be in. I still have Brendan Allen.
All right, then we have David Onama taking on Gabriel Santos. Big underdog David Onama. I guess I have David Onama.
I like Santos in this fight, but it should be a really fun one.
All right, Tafa taking on Lane. I got Tafa.
I've also got Tafa.
Hebos taking on Barber. I have
Give me
Hebos.
Hebos.
And then in the main event,
I love this fight.
Josh Emmett. Yeah, it's a fun main event. It's one of those ones, no matter who wins, you're probably going to leave happy unless you're a giant fan of one of these guys. But I think this is going to be a fun one while it lasts, and I think that Josh Emmett will be able to get it done.
I wouldn't be surprised if Josh Emmett is able to win. He's one of the best fighters in the world. He's been able to prove that for the last 6 years in the UFC. I just think Topuria does represent sort of the next breed of fighters in the division. I do think he'll be able to get the win.
Topuria probably Shia LaBeoufed it, but on that giant movie screen, he was watching Jeremy Stevens taking on Josh Emmett, and he just kept playing it, and there were tears. Last night, I was sitting at the dinner table. We were cooking supper.
Crying about Shia
No,
LaBeouf.
she was cooking supper, and we're going to go see Chris Stapleton closer to the end of summer. And I played the national anthem at the Super Bowl, and I looked away, and then I clicked on it, and it was Nick Sirianni, and I forgot. He was leaking tears listening to that one, so maybe that was Ilia Topuria watching that fight when Jeremy Stevens nearly ended the career of Josh Emmett, breaking that orbital. But a big-time fight right there. Thank you so much for all that tuned in. You guys know it. I mean, coming up, I'll turn the audio down. The people voted. They wanted that interesting thumbnail with the neon. Strickland taking on Magomedov. You can have over 10 fights. You can have over 15 fights in the UFC. You can have one fight, and they'll match you up in a main event because UFC's matchmaking is something. But
It's happened before. Justin Gaethje never fought in the UFC and got a main event. So.
Abusupyan Magomedov. Yeah, but he's a champ.
I'm just saying it happens.
Abusupyan or Abus Magomedov taking on Sean Strickland next weekend in the main event. That one from Vegas. So make sure you look out for that full card video to come out. Yeah, really enjoyed putting the show together with question mark kicks this weekend. Enjoy all those fights. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.